A world without pain. Has nothing to heal from. Welcome to Fluffy Demon D&D. This is the first episode in this 20-part deep dive campaign building masterclass. Whether you're running a Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, Shadowdark, or some homebrew madness in your garage, your campaign needs a place where your players lean in. Not just because there's loot, but because there's something in the world that hurts. Every great campaign or story has 5 core truths. The first one, your world doesn't need lore, it needs a wound. Lore is background noise. A wound is where your world still hurts and why players even care. Number 2, players don't remember maps. They remember scars. They won't recall your continent's coastline, but they'll never forget a crater where the sky collapsed. Number 3, great stories don't start with peace. They start with pressure. The best campaigns begin at the breaking point when something needs to change now. Number 4, conflict isn't optional. It's fuel. Factions, lies, power vacuums, born from your world's wound are what make every decision meaningful. And your 5th thing, your players aren't visitors, they're consequences. Their backstories shouldn't sit on top of the world. They should be buried in the middle, shaped by the same pain that reshaped the land. Okay, cool. Your world needs a wound. Not just a backstory and not just lore, but a scar that still bleeds. A trauma the setting hasn't moved on from. A break that shaped everything your players step into. Because the best campaigns, they start with pain. So let's begin with that. Part 1, why your world needs a wound. Traditionally, world building often starts with maps, villains, gods, or some ridiculous timelines. But those are shapes, they're structures. What gives your world weight, what makes it feel real, is suffering. Players don't connect to perfect worlds. You build the most intricate political structure. You design 7 new schools of magic. Map every trade route between this coast and some random place. But if nothing's wrong, your world becomes just that, a map, a museum, a theme park, someplace to go, but not really a place that you're part of. So what is a world wound? Well, it's not a war, it's not a cataclysm, it's not a villain. It's a thing that changed everything. It never got fixed. The gods shattered the moon, magic went feral. Now the tides don't stop. Nuclear war blotted the sun, corrupted the air, and now we all have to breathe with apparatuses to survive. They built the spire to escape the undead, but it's been 2,000 years and the elevators don't work anymore. A world wound is something that's unhealed, known or felt by everyone, still reshaping daily life. It's not lore, it's emotional reality. Here are some iconic examples to kind of put it into perspective. Fallout, the bombs fell, that's the wound. Civilization is a scar on top of radioactive trauma. Lord of the Rings, Sauron's first rise, the kingdoms won, but they didn't heal, and now the shadows return. The Witcher, the conjunction of the spheres merged worlds together. Magic and monsters leaked through. Nobody's been okay since. So why do players need a broken world? Because perfect worlds are boring. Struggle creates factions, scarcity, injustice, and adventure. It forces heroes to emerge. The wound isn't just story, it's gravity. Without a wound, your campaign is just a tour. With a wound, it becomes personal. So, part 2. World wounds, local wounds, and character wounds. Step 1, the world wound. You want to start big. Something broke the world. It should affect everything, even if indirectly. Reshape the economy, make people question their faith, or even tweak biology. And it always leaves room for conflict. This is your campaign's original sin. This world wound changes everything downstream. Like the floodwaters cutting a canyon into the landscape. Religions might become fractured. Magic is mistrusted or worshipped fanatically. People speak in hushed tones about what really happened. This isn't timeline flavor. This is the emotional climate of your world. Maybe the gods vanished. Now faith is fractured and divine magic is unstable, or a pale blight scorches the land 4,000 years ago. Magic never recovered. Forest rot from the inside. Step 2, the local wound. Where your world still bleeds. This is where your campaign takes place. Let's kill the idea of side quests. Seriously. Burn it, bury it, forget they ever existed. Because if your campaign is built around a properly layered world wound, there's no such thing as a side quest. There are only chapters in the larger story. Every session should push something forward. A sliver of truth buried in a non-player character's drunken rambles. A ruined statue that messes the sigil on the villain's blade. A forgotten journal that contradicts everything the players thought they knew. These aren't distractions. These are reveals. Some are small, some are big, some are quiet, and some are tragic. Each one stacks. Each one matters because they all bleed from the same wound. The plot shouldn't need filler to keep players engaged. That's what bad pacing does. That's what shallow worlds do. If your players need a break from the main story, then your main story is broken. It kind of sucks. But when the wound runs through everything, every action or non-action echoes through the world. Your players stay hooked without even realizing it. Because they're not chasing side quests, they're chasing meaning. And that's the difference between a campaign they remember and the one they just played. In this village, crops don't grow because the soil is cursed. In this city, half the people are moon-touched. They shimmer. They're dying slowly. The local wound is the playable version of the world wound. It's why the campaign starts here. Because everything matters. Because it echoes the pain beneath. And then step 3, we got to worry about the character wound. This is why your players care. Not because the world is big, not because the villain is scary, but because something happened and it hurt them. That's the character wound. And it's not optional. It's the fuse you light in your prologue. That's video 5 of the 20. It's what turns a sheet of stats into the soul with a reason to burn. But here's the thing. It has to connect to the local wound, to the world wound. If it doesn't, then your character is just an outsider looking through the glass. But if it does connect, suddenly they're not a side piece in the Game Masters or the Dungeon Masters movie. They're a pressure point on the broken surface of the world. An ant in a crumbling cathedral, yes. But maybe an ant that finds the one beam still holding everything together. And maybe they break it, or maybe they save it. But now it's their choice. That makes them matter. This is where it all comes together. The world wound is the broken history. The local wound is the living consequences. And the character wound? That's the personal echo of it all. Stacked, layered, interlocked like the ribs around the story's heart. And in the next video, we're going to take the idea and dig so deep it hurts. Episode 2, Backstories That Matter. We're going to make your character a part of the landscape, not heroes dropped into a sandbox, but threads woven into the world's unraveling. Because if your wound is the scar, the character of the blade that might cut it deeper, maybe sew it shut. Part 3, use AI to build a wound. You don't have to do this alone. Here's how to use AI without losing your creativity. I've included a link below for ChatGPT. Regardless how you feel about AI, it's here and it's here to stay. I use it a lot to take my ramblings, do a little magic, and turn them into actual readable sentences. Anyway, below I have a downloadable prompt sheet to help you build a world wound. Let's build something together. Right now, I'm going to walk you through how I use ChatGPT to turn vague ideas into living, bleeding campaign worlds. This isn't about letting AI replace your creativity. It's about giving your imagination a sparring partner. So while I'm screen sharing, feel free to follow along or just watch and soak it in. I start with a single idea. Something broke the world. To get the ideas flowing, I type in, give me 10 world-changing events that would reshape the world.
2 seconds later.
And just like that, I'm looking at a list of plagues, failed gods, rituals, shattered moons, magical rebellions. Some are big, some are subtle. And this is where the creative process actually starts. I'm not looking for the best one. I'm looking for the one that hurts. The one that bleeds into culture, faith, memory. The one that looks like fun to play over the next year or decade. But I usually hate all these, but they do get me thinking. Again, this is your sparring partner, not your robot overlord. Once I pick one, or I start over because I don't like any of them, or based on this, I come up with my own twisted narrative. Well, based off of these, I kind of like number 7, the blood census.
The global magical ritual reveals every individual's ancestry, criminal history, and latent potential in a glowing mark on their skin. It ripples through governments who rewrite its laws around genetics and potential. Caste systems form overnight. Uprisings, families shatter. Those with blank marks are hunted or revered.
But regardless how I get to this point, I follow up with the next prompt to make it fit in whatever game I'm playing. This lets AI search the interweb to find rules and parameters. AI now knows what game we're playing and can form this into a system to start giving it some feet to stand on. Again, this is a sparring partner to help ferret out your ideas. Here's something I always keep in mind. If your world includes long-lived races like elves or dwarves, this matters on a whole different scale. They didn't just inherit the trauma, they lived it. Or they feel like it's just some fading fad. Or do they remember the moment it broke? They've watched kingdoms rise and fall in the aftermath. If you want more on why playing long-lived races is hard, watch this video here. And this brings us to our next prompt. When did your campaign take place? I ask AI, what should everyday life look like 10, 100, 1,000, or in my case, 4,000 years after the world wound? And I ask it for, what about each race? Because that's where real world building lives, not in the events, but in the fallout. What did people cling to? What did they forget? Who adapted and who didn't? I keep working on the world, asking for different prompts, like make it darker, make it have more mystery, make it less about gods or whatever, until I get a wound that I really like, or that I can start to see the different layers. I then ask it for ways to fix it, or how would each race handle it, or anything. See, sparring partner. At this point in the development, I have a rough outline of a working wound. I copy and paste this into a word processing program. I personally use LibreOffice because it's free. And then I get to work making the wound complete. I tweak what I like, I discard what I don't. See, a sparring partner. Once I have this all figured out, or at least close, I copy it again and throw it back into AI to start the next process. I prompt AI, rewrite this as a usable platform for my campaign. I've included that below. You can download all of these and see how I got from point A to point B using AI, along with my final result. Use it, or maybe just have fun reading it or seeing how I did all this. And this brings us to our local wound, which is taking the world wound and going deeper. With your world wound in hand, you need a local wound. This is where your campaign exists. This is where your characters will be dropped into. Your local wound is the visible crack in the world where the players live. It is the poisoned well, the vanished village, the monthly sacrifices, the broken bridge, the old mine that breathes at night. It's here. It hurts. And it never stops reminding the players that something is deeply wrong. Your campaign is made of many, many local wounds, all interweaved together, telling the story of what is going on. Think of a war. There are so many facets to a war. You have various fronts, you have economics playing into it, you have battles, estimated lives, and so many other things that make up a war. One event is significant, but all of them together, that's history. So where do we start? This is the prompt I begin with. Based on my world wound, give 10 towns and or regions that are dealing with the fallout of the wound in a unique way. Then I follow up with, how is this terrifying? Give me 3 stories that are being told about the wound that keeps getting retold over and over again. Make 2 of them pure fiction. Make 1 of them based off of fact. You'll get everything from desperate survivors to places thriving in twisted new economies. These are perfect launch points for your story. Each one a flavor of the wound. This is not where your characters start trying to fix the world. This is where they try and survive it. Refine these, make them all important. These are going to give you a great scaffolding to work with. But we need to make the characters for your players first, so we can drop them in the world. Not into the heart of the wound, but also not into safety, but right on the edge, right into the local wound that you just developed. This is in the shadow of it all, where consequences still sting and nobody agrees on what's really going on. Before we can drop them, we kind of need to make them first. We'll work on that in the next video, episode 2, Backstories That Matter. Keep your world wound and your local wounds at the ready. The next episode is all about making a character, rolling stats, giving it a backstory that is beyond epic, and how do they fit into the wound and the local wounds. I will show you how we'll embed them in right inside of it. Not with loving care, but with purpose. This is how you build a world that feels alive. You don't start with a map or a timeline. You start with a break, a scar, a silence that people are still screaming into. And when you let AI help you explore, what rises out is pure pain. Part 4, examples that hit hard. Example 1, dark fantasy. This is your D&D, your Pathfinder, those type of games. The world wound is the sun dimmed 2,000 years ago. It's not gone, just weaker. Plants grow slower and people age faster. The local wound is the farming village breeds eyeless pigs underground. Children cough blood. The character wound. She was born during an eclipse. The town whispers she's probably the cause. Example 2, sci-fi, Event Horizon style. The world wound, faster than light travel, shattered time on the edges of known space. Now ships return with ghosts of their crew still aboard. Local wound, a French colony. Time is erratic. They forgot conversations or relive the same event more than once. People go mad trying to track their lives. The character wound, he remembers dying on a mission, but he's still there. Part 5, your next step. In our next episode, we're going to talk about character creation backstory. We'll build characters that bleed. Characters whose pain connects directly to the world wound. And we're not going to do any one-page tropes, no generic orphan stories. We're building people who you will remember. We're going to make sure it feels like a response to the world you just built. You'll learn how to use wounds to anchor your backstory. Avoid the orphan cliche. Tie your character arc to the world's healing or descent. If this episode sparked an idea or helped shape your world, hit like, share your own world wound in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. If you're using AI to world build, link your prompts, share your creations. Let's get smarter together. Because if your world wound doesn't bleed, your campaign won't breathe. This is Fluffy Demon D&D, and this is how great campaigns begin.